Club Penguin, Neopets, Webkinz, Pop Tropica. Long ago, the four nations ruled the internet in harmony. Then, everything changed when adulthood attacked. Okay, I'm playing too much. But seriously, if you grew up in the 2000s, there's a good chance you had an account on at least one of these websites. My land of choice was the world of Neopia and its Neopets, which was arguably the most expansive of the digital universes. There were dozens of fantasy pet species, a whole globe of themed lands, and even some shockingly detailed lore. Apparently, Webkinz is making a comeback, and word on the iceberg is that Club Penguin may be making a return soon as well. But even if it doesn't, there are fan recreations online that you can play instead. Pop Tropica went through this weird thing where they basically had to delete everything because of Flash going away, and then they slowly started to re-upload everything, and then they basically gave up before they finished that process and sold the game to coolmathgames.com of all places. So, while the website is now defunct, you can still play an incomplete version of the game that way. But Neopets, my darling Neopets, has always been available to play. Through every stage of the internet, Neopets has remained steady, even if its popularity didn't. Hi, I'm Sasha, and I like to take deep dives into childhood media in order to escape the horrors of adulthood. Neopets is one of those things that I'll suddenly remember after years of not thinking about it. And then I get obsessed with it again for a while before ultimately getting busy with real-world stuff again, and then the cycle continues. Which, looking at its competitors, is something I realize I've taken for granted. And it recently popped into my head again. So, once again, I'm asking, for the first time since I think 2018, what has happened to Neopets? In case you aren't familiar with Neopets, or if it's been a really long time since you played, I'll give a condensed overview of the game. Neopets is a virtual world where you can create and care for fantasy creatures called Neopets. And unlike Club Penguin and Webkinz, players can enjoy virtually all of the features the website has to offer without paying real money to do so. In-game items are purchased with a digital currency called Neopoints, which can be earned a variety of ways. What made Neopets so great, in my opinion, was that it combined features from a lot of other different games into one massive platform. The first obvious comparison is to Tamagotchi, the original digital pet. Except on Neopets, your pets don't age or die. The pets can get sick, and if they go so many days without being fed, they'll have a hunger status of dying, but they won't actually die from starvation. Which is particularly helpful for someone like me who frequently abandons their pets for years at a time. So it makes you feel a sense of responsibility without being so intense that it adds actual stress to your life. It's also similar to Pokemon with all the made-up pets that you can train to fight in the Battle Dome. And you can travel across the virtual globe to train them and purchase supplies. It's also like the game of life because you can choose your own adventures, but random stuff can happen to you. Sometimes it'll be something good, like a fairy randomly gifting you something, or it can be something bad, like literally getting robbed. And also some in-between ones. For example, one of my pets was zapped with a ray that turned him into a baby. And it's literally been so long that I can't confidently say what he looked like before because I haven't come across a paintbrush that won't cost literally everything I own. So I guess he's just stuck like this forever. On the upside, he's adorable, and the baby paintbrush would have cost me a fortune. On the other hand, I didn't consent to turning him into a baby, and it makes it really hard to dress him up because a lot of clothing items aren't compatible with this form. I would argue it's also similar to Monopoly in some ways because players are encouraged to start their own stores. And boy, are people quick to take advantage of desperation for specific items by selling them for absolutely egregious prices. You can also put money into the bank and put items you own up for auction. And you can even haggle with the NPC shopkeepers to get a better deal on the items they sell. The game also works as a social network platform because you can interact with other players on chat boards and even join a guild. That's really only the tip of the iceberg, but that covers most of the basics. And explaining the game itself is not the main focus of this video. Honestly, I think one of the best parts about Neopets is that you can be as involved or as isolated as you want to be. You can be super active on the message boards, make friends, and enter contests, or you can stick to playing mini games and feeding your pets and leave it at that. In its heyday, Neopets was very prominent and very profitable. It started with just introducing your typical banner ads to the website. Then that quickly evolved into physical merchandise like clothing, games, and toys. I had this bad boy myself, and the board game was a childhood favorite of mine. Actually, I think I still have it in my game closet. Adding on to the Pokemon comparisons, they also created a trading card game, which was nominated multiple times for Toy of the Year. This was all fine and, let's be real, expected for something that's popular with kids. But Neopets also introduced some more controversial ways of making money. The first was the creation of the premium membership. I feel like this is pretty standard for most websites nowadays, but back then it was controversial because Neopets was something that had started out being completely free. I believe when it was initially introduced, the main draw was the removal of ads, but it's now evolved to have a lot more perks. Then, they had the addition of what they called immersive advertising, which is by far the most controversial money-making tactic they had on the site. These were basically sponsored games or other interactive features on the site instead of your basic standalone ads. And this was problematic in the eyes of many adults because this website was primarily for children. Some argued that kids didn't have the familiarity with advertisements yet to understand that they were being advertised to. Which is a sentiment that I have mixed feelings on because, as a kid, I did understand what an advertisement was. I did not, however, understand that the goal of said advertisement was to get me to ask my parents to spend money on stuff. I go back and forth with my stance on this issue because I feel like the central problem is actually the morality of if companies should be allowed to advertise to children in general. Because, of course, an interactive game is going to be more exciting, but I don't see how it's any less predatory to show toy commercials on a kid's TV network. Especially when it's ads for toys based on the show that the kids are literally watching at the time. I don't know, maybe the main takeaway here should be that it's inherently predatory to advertise to children in general. But moving on, we have the last big money-making feature that was added to the Neopets website, which is the creation of Neocash and the NC Mall. Oh, I loathe it. This was an actual pay-to-play feature on the website. It wasn't like the membership where you just get exclusive perks. Neocash is a separate digital currency from Neopoints, and it can only be obtained by spending actual money, whether that's directly or using a code from buying Neopets merch. The appeal of the NC Mall was, and largely still is, centered around wearable clothing items for your pet. Notice how I said wearable. This was a big deal at the time because prior to this, paintbrushes were the only way you could change your Neopets look. They did have clothing stores for some odd reason, but you couldn't wear what you bought, so they were essentially pointless. Now, even as a kid, I knew this was some BS. The existence of clothing in Neopets obviously made players want to have the ability to dress up their pets. And they obviously knew this. But instead of creating an update that all players could enjoy, they put it behind a paywall. And it was made even worse by them introducing the Pet Spotlight on the homepage, which highlighted really cool-looking customized pets whose owners had obviously shopped at the NC Mall. And there was a big focus on exclusive items and special gifts that could only be bought at the NC Mall. Quite literally creating a haves versus have-nots environment. Now, I'm just speculating, but I personally think this is what prompted the beginning of Neopets losing its popularity. Neopets did eventually realize that, as the word implies, gatekeeping prevents the majority of people from using or enjoying your product. So they did slowly start converting clothing items that were bought with Neopoints into wearable items, and now they regularly sell wearable items in the regular clothing stores, and wearable items are also common prizes. But did this change come a little bit too late? Let's look into that a bit more. Before taking a look at the current state of Neopets, I want to review the history of Neopets to see how they got to where they are today. Neopets has been around for over 25 years, and it has quite the storied history, which of course includes some scandals. It's really hard for me to resist going down a research rabbit hole. But I'm the type of player who likes to keep to themselves, so I was only aware of a handful of these scandals before researching for this video. And because scandals were never the main focus of this video, I'm not going to mention all of them. I'm just going to touch on the major points in Neopets history that I think are helpful for the larger context. Neopets was launched all the way back in 1999. Believe it or not, it was created by two British university students, Adam Powell and Donna Williams, and the target audience was other university students. But its potential to reach a far more expansive audience quickly became apparent. The website grew really fast, and within a couple of months, they sold shares of the website to investors. This led to Doug Doring buying the majority shares of the business in 2000 and turning Neopets into a full-fledged, incorporated business. He introduced the advertisements, the premium membership, the merchandise, and most notably, the controversial immersive advertising, which is a term he trademarked for some reason, as though other companies would be eager to advertise the fact that they were using allegedly deceptive marketing tactics. Then, after spending 5 years building Neopets up to what was arguably its peak, Doring sold the company in 2005 to Viacom, which is best known for being the parent company of Nickelodeon and Paramount, for a whopping $160 million, which equates to over $266 million in today's money. So, if anything were to give some perspective on just how big of a deal Neopets was in the early 2000s, I think that price tag does the trick. Shortly after this deal was made, Powell and Williams, the original founders, left because they basically didn't have any say in how the company was being run anymore. Tale as old as time. Creator of a company sells the majority of the company's shares, loses the ability to have the final say in anything, and things slowly start going downhill. Now, things didn't go downhill right away. Neopets continued to thrive for several more years under Viacom. This era was when the Neo Mall and Neo Cash were introduced. And in 2007, they released a redesign of the characters, which, for some reason, they did not do in full so that it would affect all players equally, which led to a whole mess of ongoing problems that I will briefly touch on later. That's pretty much the most significant stuff to happen during the Viacom era, so we're going to jump ahead to 2014, when Viacom sold Neopets to Jumpstart Games. And things were pretty much immediately a mess. Within a year, there were mass layoffs and the website had become glitchy. In a 2015 statement addressing the layoffs, the then CEO said that they were planning to fix the website issues and release new content, but as far as I can tell, neither one of those things happened. Things remained pretty stagnant on the Neopets website until Jumpstart was acquired by a company called NetDragon in 2017. Then things continued to be stagnant until they got a new CEO. And to his credit, he did try to revamp Neopets as a brand. In 2019, they released a word game app, which got scrapped a year later. He announced that they had planned to launch new merch and basically try to breathe new life into the franchise. And most notably, he announced that a Neopets animated series was in development and was set to premiere in 2021, which seems so long overdue given the many well-known characters and huge amount of lore they can pull from. I'm surprised Nickelodeon never tried to make an animated series while they owned Neopets. But despite having partnered with a studio and doing the press rounds to announce its development, the show sadly never got made. Then things took a really weird turn in 2021 when Neopets announced they'd be selling NFTs, to the delight of absolutely no one. Seriously, literal fan websites were helping organize the protest against this, and they had the support of seemingly every active Neopets player at the time. This was supposed to be part of the new Neopets metaverse, which sounded like it was basically going to be a pay-for-play NFT version of Neopets. And this was following a failed crypto trading card game that they'd tried in 2018. So, since their continuously dwindling fan base, aka the only people who would consider giving them money for anything, all seemed to hate this idea, they ended up scrapping the project. And mind you, virtually nothing has changed or been updated during this entire life cycle with Jumpstart. So they're announcing all these changes and initiatives while still having a broken website. And just when you think Jumpstart's legacy couldn't get worse, don't worry, it definitely can. Because also during its time under Jumpstart, Neopets suffered not one, but 2 data breaches. One in 2016 and another in 2022. The fact that they had such flimsy security was yet another sign of the website being majorly neglected. And the 2022 data breach led to a class action lawsuit because they failed to notify Neopets users that the data breach had happened in the first place. A class action lawsuit for something that affected millions of players is definitely not going to help an already struggling company. And so, in 2023, Jumpstart Games shut down. There was no official statement or reason given for the shutdown. But I believe that a massive lawsuit plus having no money equals bankruptcy. Throughout this little history lesson, you may have noticed things continuously getting worse. But believe it or not, this story does not have a tragic ending. And that's largely thanks to this gentleman here, Dominic Law. I don't like to put people on pedestals, especially CEOs, but I don't even think it's an exaggeration to say that he's the person who saved Neopets. See, Dom was part of the NetDragon team, which, remember, had become Jumpstart's new parent company several years before it was shut down. Like many of us, Dom grew up playing Neopets, so he of course had a soft spot for it. So when Jumpstart inevitably shut down, he pushed NetDragon to save Neopets from suffering the same fate as its neglectful owner. And shortly after that, he assembled a team to form World of Neopia Inc., a new company that would proceed to buy out Neopets from NetDragon. And how do I know all of this, you may ask? In a surprisingly transparent post from July 2023 titled A New Era for Neopets, the Neopets team laid out everything that had been going on with the website and brand for the last decade. They acknowledged that the website was neglected while under Jumpstart Games, and as a result, the company had been operating at a financial loss for the last decade. But World of Neopia, also known as the Neopets team, didn't want to see Neopets go, and they hoped to bring the brand into a sort of renaissance. And they state they had managed to raise $4 million to help them do so. In the post, they admit to the many shortcomings they need to fix and announce that aside from fixing the website, they plan to work on some new projects as well. So that brings us to the question that I ultimately wanted to answer. Where is Neopets today? When I first went to the Neopets website, it threw me for a loop because for the first time in the 20 years I've been on Neopets, the homepage has changed. Historically, every time I've gone to Neopets, it was the simplistic design with the gray-white background and a gold banner and some announcements on the homepage. You could explore the website to an extent, and I believe even play the games without logging in, but you of course needed an account to get the full game experience and actually save anything. Now, however, you need an account in order to access the World of Neopets in any capacity, whether it's logging into an old account or creating a new one. I'm under the impression that this was done in order to improve the website security and help separate the new, stable content from the old content that is still undergoing repairs. So let's get into some of this new content. For starters, they currently have 2 mobile games out, Tales of Decardia and Fairy Fragments. Fairy Fragments is a match 3 style game, and Tales of Decardia looks kind of like a mix between Animal Crossing and one of those roller coaster tycoon games. In 2020, Jumpstart's CEO teased that they'd be releasing a game called Island Builders that year, which obviously didn't happen. And it's believed that that evolved into Tales of Decardia instead. Based on the trailers, the graphics of the games look really good. I think this is a smart move because it offers players something new without messing around with the original game in a way that would upset nostalgic players. You can also convert in-game points into Neopoints, which is a smart way to tie in the 2 platforms. In that initial 2023 post from the World of Neopia team, they mentioned creating a mobile game called World of Neopets that would be a simulation-style game where you play as the actual Neopet. Weirdly, this still hasn't been released despite being announced before the other 2 games. Allegedly, this was being built from what they could salvage from Jumpstart's messy metaverse project, so I wouldn't be surprised if they do just end up scrapping it completely, but time will tell. When I started my research, a tab was on the website for it, indicating that it was still in development, and then like a week later, it was removed. So I'm guessing that they are finally giving up on it. They introduced this new login credential called a NeoPass, which is designed to easily connect your account across all of these games, assuming you're playing more than one. And it supposedly adds more security to your account, which is particularly important for a website that has experienced multiple data breaches. But if you don't feel like making one, don't worry, because the main Neopets website decided to join the rest of the 21st century and add 2FA to the account login. Literally just a few days before I started research for this video, Neopets announced the release of the Mega Minigames collection, coming to Switch, PlayStation, and PC in March 2026. It looks to be an updated version of their most popular Flash games, all in one place. I'll touch more on this later, but you can still play several of these games on the website, so I'm a little confused as to why someone would want to pay money to play them instead. I assume they'll have updated graphics and smoother gameplay, but it's still an interesting choice. Then again, in the digital age where internet-based content can become lost media overnight, owning a physical copy of the games would quite literally be the only way to preserve them and guarantee that you won't lose access to them in the future. Neopets has also reintroduced merch. The online merch store has clothes, plushies, and a renewed version of the trading card game. And on top of that, they've been doing collabs with other brands as well. I think the more depressing reality gets, the more nostalgic we as a collective society become, so in hindsight, it is wild to think that Neopets has continued to exist all of these years, and only in the last few years has there been any sort of merch related to it. Because any once popular intellectual property will sell products, even if it's an otherwise inactive brand. I mean, I literally bought this Treasure Planet hat a few months ago. So it was a huge oversight for Neopets to not be taking advantage of this. But hey, there's a reason why Jumpstart went out of business. Speaking of business, to help promote the new Neopets brand and products, Neopets has started an affiliate program. I think this has become pretty standard in the modern era for any company trying to target people below the age of 60, and it especially makes sense for an online game. If we start to see any other nostalgic brands reemerge, I won't be surprised if they do the same thing. And lastly, something that I think is really amazing is their fan art program, which essentially gives artists legal permission to sell artwork and other creations through places like Etsy, and they get promoted through the Neopets website. I just think this is so wholesome. It's a great way to reconnect with the community and show gratitude for the loyal fans that have helped keep the brand alive all these years. I don't think I've ever seen a company do something like this. If anything, you'll usually hear about companies trying to sue their fans for selling unauthorized merchandise, so it's nice to see a company have a positive reaction to their creative community instead. And now to the second and most important question: can you still play Neopets? If you couldn't tell from the many hints I dropped earlier, the answer is yes. Yes, my friends, we can. If you have an existing account and you haven't been on the website in a long time, because of the 2022 data breach, you'll be required to reset your password. And hopefully, you'll have the same experience as I did, and your account will be exactly how you left it. All of my Neopoints were there, my inventory was the same, my kids hadn't been fed in 7 years, but they were ultimately fine, and I was able to jump back in as if I'd never left. The only thing that seemed to have been reset were my stats in the Battle Dome. The stats of my pets were the same, but their battles fought, won, and lost had been reset. Although I don't think I had that good of a record, so I'm not really mad about that. I had to refamiliarize myself with everything, but it's unlocked so many happy memories being able to play things like Ice Cream Machine and Carnival Terror again. And to go back to all the lands of Neopia and see all their charming differences again. Of course, it isn't perfect. Like I said before, World of Neopia Inc. has admitted that Neopets has been neglected for 10 years. And while it would already be hard enough to fix a website that's been that severely neglected overnight, it's way more complicated for one as large as Neopets. So here's a heads up on some issues you'll encounter if you plan to revisit or create a new account. First of all, I would argue one of the biggest things to rock the internet in the last decade was the retirement of Adobe Flash in 2020. This powered pretty much the entire Neopets website, so as you can imagine, that created a big problem. The Neopets team seems to have fixed the biggest/most frequently visited parts of the website by updating them to HTML5, which has become the new standard, but there are still several parts of the website that have errors because they haven't been updated yet. And you won't really know until you're trying to interact with them. I discovered this the hard way when I bought a scratch ticket, only to discover that I couldn't scratch it because it needed Flash. The team has been very transparent about things they've updated, and they seem to be relying on the community to let them know what areas should be prioritized first and what they may have missed, which is fair enough in my opinion. I wish they'd put some type of block on pages that lead to outdated elements, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're not even aware of all the issues yet. Something else that may throw you is that the website will frequently switch between the new interface and the old one. There's nothing inherently bad about it. Like, everything's fine, it doesn't mean you clicked a broken link, it just happens. My account was still intact, my computer didn't break down, but it did throw me for a second. Just like the Flash problem, this largely happens with less frequently visited pages. The more I played, I did notice that the website did slow down and need to be refreshed sometimes when switching between the two, which was annoying, but there were no long-term issues. However, the website is way slower when playing at night versus the afternoon, so I'm guessing their servers can't handle the same capacity that they used to at its peak. There are also a few locked parts of the site that are clearly in the process of being updated. The most notably locked part of the site is the Pound, which is where players would get new pets, exchange pets, or abandon pets. I'm not going to get into the whole unconverted Neopets scandal because I literally just learned about it this past month, but long story short, dedicated players wanted Neopets with the original art style from before the 2007 redesign because they were super rare, and this led to people selling these Neopets to other players for real money, or even straight up scamming them by taking their money and then not giving them anything. That's why there's this nice little note at the bottom saying that if you're trying to do something like this, they're going to freeze your account. People were also trying to hack the Pound search system so they could basically speedrun a search for these rare pets as well. So clearly the Pound needed some more oversight than what it had prior, which is what they seem to be working on now. So bummer if you were hoping to just innocently adopt a new Neopet, but hopefully things go according to plan and this will only be for a few more months. This was the first part of the website I encountered that was truly locked off, but I won't be surprised if there's others that I just don't know about or that will come along in the future. Basically, it's been a lot of growing pains. One thing that really did annoy me though was that the ads are a lot more disruptive than they used to be. The old website relied on banner ads that appeared at the top and sides of the screen, which is pretty standard for most websites that use banner ads. Sure, they can be annoying, but they usually don't impact the overall experience. Now, the ads are those annoying pop-out window ads that play videos, and they're on both sides of the screen. And at first, there wasn't even an X button for me. They literally block a portion of the screen, which is extremely frustrating, and even more so because of the fact that there is room on the sides of the screen to put normal banner ads. I don't know if they've done this on purpose to help push sales of the premium memberships, or if it's just an oversight as they're trying to rebuild the website, but come on guys, this is a little ridiculous. And I'm leaning towards the latter because when it's the former, usually the websites will have some type of pop-up that's like, tired of annoying ads? Pay for premium. But I wouldn't have even known about the option to get rid of ads if I hadn't been poking around the website to find stuff on my own. I don't usually bother with ad blockers because they create such a hassle whenever I'm trying to watch something on streaming, which is like every day, but this is the first time in a long time that I've seriously considered downloading one again. But back to the positive stuff. Aside from being able to enjoy the basic gameplay features again, Neopets has also brought back a bunch of the classic minigames that you play to earn Neopoints. Thanks to an open source Flash emulator called Ruffle, most of the old Flash games can be played like they never left. Sadly, this did not apply to my beloved Hannah and the Pirate Caves. Speaking of things not changing, I'm still horrible at fairy bubbles. They've also brought back special events like the Festival of Fears and the Fairy Festival. And on Halloween, they gave the website this cute spooky design. Mimicking real-life events is a very clear sign of an active website, and it's a stark contrast to how the website was treated while under Jumpstart. And there's a new ongoing story plot with interactive elements that allow you to earn points that you can exchange for prizes. They've also made it front and center on the website, and you can easily locate the page through the Explore tab, which I appreciate because in the past, I always felt like I didn't know big events like story plots were happening until afterward. It could have been because I was a literal child, but it definitely wasn't this easy to locate these types of events before. As part of their relaunch and rebuild in 2023, Neopets launched a community ambassador program. These ambassadors are dedicated players who have volunteered their time to provide the developers with feedback and share community concerns. This way, the Neopets team can address player concerns and tailor the game to be what players want based on actual representation instead of just guessing. It's kind of like a government that actually works properly. The Neopets team regularly posts updates to the site, including discussions of their achievements and where they've fallen short. And I find it surprisingly refreshing to see so much transparency from a company. So yeah, overall, a lot is going on with Neopets. Which, if we're being honest, isn't something any of its original competitors can say today. So there you have it, the rise, downfall, and potential renaissance of Neopets. So far, I've done videos on things that used to be good that got ruined, things that got rebranded, and things that got canceled entirely. So it was nice to look into something as long-standing as Neopets and see that it's seemingly doing well while still sticking to its roots. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but seeing how open the Neopets team is appearing to be with everything makes me feel like the brand is actually in capable hands. It's a nice palate cleanser from the shady business practices that we usually don't find out about until years later or after something has gone drastically wrong. And honestly, I'm just really happy that I was able to go in and play Neopets again. If it wasn't for the new team taking over, Neopets probably would have unceremoniously disappeared alongside Jumpstart, and based on how things were being run at that time, active Neopets players probably would have been the only ones to be notified about it, if anyone. So I would have gone to log in one day only to find out that my Neopets had been ripped away from me and I didn't even get to cherish my last moments with them. But what are your thoughts? Have you used Neopets through all of its eras? Did this video inspire you to go back to your old account that you also haven't touched in years? Have you played any of the new Neopets games? Let me know! If you liked this video, go ahead and subscribe for more childhood deep dives, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.